All right, so Elizabeth Gloeggler has been the CEO for Literacy New Jersey since 2014. I remember it well. As a champion for adult literacy, Elizabeth worked with a team to bring together 9 literacy organizations that merged to form Literacy New Jersey in 2014. By joining forces, these organizations shared strengths and built resilience to face challenges. In 2019, she helped facilitate 2 mergers. Literacy New Jersey now supports students in 12 counties throughout New Jersey. Before 2014, Elizabeth was the executive director for Literacy Volunteers of Union County for 13 years. And I will officially turn it over to you, Elizabeth.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so excited to see so many familiar and all your beautiful faces. Welcome, friends. I also noticed that our board president, Christine Degastino, is on. So everybody wave to Christine. She's down there in one of the squares. And we will make sure to not forget to take a screenshot at some point so that we can post it. There's all kinds of fun places to post pictures. So I'm so excited that you all decided to join us today. We're talking about such exciting stuff, which is sustainability for our organizations. And I really want today to be a great conversation where we all have some give and take, but I also have some slides for you so that we can talk about some of the things that we've tried here at Literacy New Jersey. So how I'd like to start this session, since there's only a few of us, is to go around and have everybody introduce themselves. So here's what we want to try and take enough time so we can know who's in the room, but let's try and also be as brief as we can. So we're going to kind of tell us your name, what your organization is, and then if you could give me one thing that you think has been a challenge around as we move forward around keeping your organization alive and vibrant, one of the challenges around sustainability, and Jessica will take some notes for us. So we could do this by, let me see.
I'll go. You want me to go?
I do. Go ahead. Christine's going to start. and then Christine, once you go, pass it to someone else.
Okay. I don't see everybody here right now. So, okay. Hi, my name is Christine Degastino. As Elizabeth mentioned, I am the board president, but my day job, I'm the director of marketing for the Middlesex County Vocational and Technical Schools. So there's 5 schools, the VOTEC schools, as we call them, in Middlesex County. I just started this job, I would say in December, and I'm loving it. So now I'm working in the school system, basically. So challenges, the only challenge is it's not an organization, it's a school, is to get everybody on track here. We just started where all the kids now are coming in. All of the teachers came in. So we just started that this week. So let's see, how long we can go without getting, a COVID positive in the school.
And so before Christine throws it to someone else,
Yes.
So those of you who are in either libraries or schools, I think of it the exact same way, because in order for your programs to be vibrant, you have to make sure that the same resources are allocated to your programs, whether that's a library, whether that's a school. And so think about some of the things that might be challenging around making sure that people are always understanding how important your programs are, so that you continue and keep going on and on and on in the future. So, okay, Christine, who are you passing it to?
I can't see anybody up here for some reason. All I see is you, and then I see.
I will pass it to Amy.
It's not doing it. Oh, here we go. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Lamb. I'm the Director of Literacy Volunteers of Somerset County. We are independent. We are not affiliated with a library or a school or anything like that. I've been the director for 5 years. I've been involved with the program for more than 20. And I'd say the biggest challenge during the pandemic has been I think the same challenge that we have not in the pandemic is just such a small staff wearing so many hats. So, going from marketing to technology to accounting, and I see Phil Arminio just signed on, but he's our board president. We have a great board. It's very supportive. But the day-to-day, there's just two of us doing all those functions, which is like many people. So.
All right, Amy, who are you going to send it to?
Oh, sorry. Debbie.
I guess I'm the only Debbie. Hey, thanks, Amy. So I'm Debbie Leon. I have been the executive director of literacy volunteers in Morris County for, oh my God, 25 years.
Ooh.
So it's a long time. Wonderful organization. We've seen a lot of changes. And honestly, I would say that that's kind of the thing that I think is an issue I'd like to talk about, which is almost like staying relevant, keeping up with the changing world. I think that's important, especially for an organization that's been around for a long time like we have. So that's a challenge, always a challenge.
Who are you going to throw it to, Debbie?
Okay, can I go to Victoria?
Hello, everybody. Victoria Hilditch. I'm an adult services librarian and the ESL coordinator at Ridgewood Public Library. The challenges of going forward, it's interesting, I think, of how we are providing programs virtually for our students that are relevant. But I am wondering of once we finally open up more, will we have some that will want to stay remote and virtual, and how we combine it and get materials to both things and how to run a dual program kind of like that. So I see that in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you. Victoria.
And
Who are you
let
throwing
me
it
see,
to?
I have, sorry about that. Marilyn Katz.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Katz, and I'm this assistant coordinator with Literacy Volunteers of Pascack Valley for about 6 years now. Maureen Lastumbo is the coordinator. And we are located in Westwood Library, but we have 9 other satellites in different libraries in Bergen County. And I would say our biggest challenge right now is, I would say is getting new students with the libraries open on a limited basis. So we've gotten new volunteers all year round, and we do have the support of the other 9 libraries continuing, but it's just reaching out to our students. And I'm going to pass it on to Phil.
Okay, good afternoon. I was pointed out by Amy before. My name is Phil Arminio, and I am the board president for the Literacy Volunteers group of Somerset County. And I've been the board president for a couple of years now. Prior to that, I was volunteer tutors and conversation group leader. So I've been with the volunteer organization now for about 10 to 12 years, and I've seen a lot of the changes that have occurred. Obviously, I came in with the expectation of teaching basic English to Americans that didn't speak English or had literacy problems, and then it really turned out to be English as a second language to immigrants, to people from other countries, and that's the majority of the work that we do now. And to do that, then in both an immigration free environment and immigration restricted environment, and the politics around that too. So sustainability of that as administration changes and politics changes, I think it's something that's always in the back of my mind, since new immigrants coming into this country being felt welcome or not being felt welcome, and that's an issue that I always struggle with because of like I said, the changing politics. Obviously in New Jersey, we have an immigrant friendly environment, but outside of the New Jersey, other states are not as such. So again, the politics of it, that's what concerns me about.
Thank you, Phil. I'm so glad when I see board members here. That's so wonderful. Welcome. Phil, who are you going to send it to? Who's going to go next?
I guess, Laura, did you go already? I joined a little bit later. So Laura Stanton?
Yeah, I did not go yet. Thank you. I guess I wasn't sure where the question was. Were we talking specifically about COVID or in general for sustainability?
Nope, just in general. Just in general.
Okay.
I mean, obviously everything we talk about these days has some
Right.
COVID context to it, but
Okay. Well, I'm going to put COVID aside for now, since I feel like I've talked that to death. I think for my program, a lot it's funding. Losing my earbud. Funding, which also affects staffing, which is small, which affects the workload. I'm part of I'm Literacy Volunteers of Salem and Cumberland. I'm part of a community action agency that has a lot of other programs that sometimes I compete with for funding. And literacy will be in all the literature to appeal to funders, but I may not necessarily be the recipient of it. I also have a lot of small funders that all seem to be my boss at times, and sometimes at the same time. The funding requests, the follow-up reports, I feel like they just keep coming. And I was doing the math on my salary and the amount of the grant, and when I spend like a week doing somebody's report, thinking this is really worth it. But that's pretty much the challenge with us. We're a staff of 2. Getting volunteers is always a challenge as well.
great. Thank you, Laura. Who are you going to send it to?
Let's see who I see that hasn't gone. Christian, did you go? Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I was late, but as you have been sharing already, many hats. So I have to agree with everybody about funding seems to be a big issue, and certainly they're wearing many hats for every single one of the members of the team. It's just amazing the many things that we do, and even these days a lot of technical support and counseling. This seems to be a biggie these days too. And managing people expectations, and everybody is on edge, so it's hard to keep everybody calm and everybody still doing what we always do, which is we're here to help people and we're here to overcome all those hurdles. But everybody's on edge. Everybody has been on lockdown for a year, so it is what it is. But I would say funding as the biggest one.
Great. Thank you, Christian. Christian, who are you going to send it to? Who's going to introduce themselves next?
I only see 6 people in here, but there are 11. So give me 1 second to see all the participants, and that way. Sorry, guys. How about Anthony?
Hello. I'm sorry about not being visible. As Elizabeth knows, I'm hunkered down on a grant that's due tomorrow.
That's right. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for doing that.
No problem. I'm the manager of the Burlington County Consortium, in which Literacy New Jersey is a tremendous partner, and we're poised to pursue this next grant. The biggest challenge I see in Burlington County is just trying to get everyone on the same page, because we have so many resources and so many folks doing wonderful things in our community, but it's tough getting the workforce development network to like really tie in and hone in on the things that they do best and support each other. So that's what we're striving to do. We got some great things happening, but just trying to get cohesiveness.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. I think that we may have gotten everybody. I'm going to throw in an answer also. So, and then I'll ask Jessica if she has one. But the one that I was going to throw in, which has kind of been touched on, is some of the accountability that we have for a lot of our funders, like what they're asking from us. for the dollars that they give us. The numbers they want to see, and kind of the outcomes, the growth in the outcomes, and what they need to see for the money that they're giving us. So that's mine. How about you, Jessica? You have anyone to add?
I mean, I would have said a lot of these things that you guys all said around capacity and the hats. I think it's tied to that. We have a lot of expectations to manage for the money, right? So we all are chopped into 1,000 different pieces, and that makes it very hard to move forward. So yeah, I kind of agree with all of it.
Yeah. It seems like we're all kind of feeling the same things. Here's what I'd like to do next. I'm going to have Jessica jump to the next slide. I thought that a good way to start the conversation would be to kind of frame sustainability for us all. So I gave you a definition, which is really, really long. But the words that I want us to think about when we think about sustainability is, how do we give support to hold things up, to keep things up, and to continue things at a certain level. But the words that I found even more interesting when I was looking for definitions of sustainability was the words that also mean sustainability. So supportable, maintainable, strong, viable, justifiable. So I thought that those were helpful things too when we think of the definition. How do we maintain these things that we're doing as we move forward, and as it gets harder and harder to maintain our literacy programs? And then Jessica, I'm going to ask you to jump to the next slide. The other thing that I wanted to just pull up, which to sort of set the stage for our conversation, is that, and this I found on the Candid blog, and it was this very interesting article about nonprofits closing their doors. It was a little bit about COVID, but not totally. The statistic that I found really interesting is that they have all these different models of how many nonprofits close their door, and they kind of rate them as to which are probable. So they have like a best case scenario and a worst case scenario. But realistically, what they say is that 11% of nonprofits close their doors every year, which was a really scary statistic to me, because there's 11 of us on the call right now. And what that means is that 1 out of 10, pretty much 1 out of 10 nonprofits closes their doors every year. And then on top of that, they're adding numbers because of COVID, which they have no idea what that's going to mean. Is that going to mean 7%? But it could mean as much larger numbers. So we'll see what happens. And it's this climate of, as we try to work our nonprofits and we try to work so hard, whether we're in a program that's inside of another organization, like a library or a school, or whether we're a standalone nonprofit organizations, we're all facing these things of how do we make sure that the work that we're doing that's so important continues to happen even against the challenges. And so those were the two pieces of things. Those were the two things I wanted to bring to the conversation before we start to discuss. And I think those were the two, right, Jessica? My next slide is just let's get the conversation started. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is have Jessica just pull down the slide so we can see each other. And then we can kind of start by having some conversations about some of these things. So when we think of the challenges that we talked about earlier, what are some things that we could talk about that might be possible solutions for some of those challenges? Having to wear too many hats, funders and what their expectations are. The stuff that I brought out, closing doors, people having to close their doors, funding, the smaller amounts of funding and how hard it is to get it. Those seem to be common threads for all of us. But now let's think about some things that maybe that we've done that have been helpful. Debbie's dying to talk. She's not on mute.
I'm just laughing. Things that are helpful, it's hard to think about. I mean, the one thing that I will give us all credit for is that we are still here in spite of all of the amazing transformations that we felt this year. I don't think there's anything our program is doing from a programming point of view or from a financial point of view that's the same as it was 2 years ago. So I give us all a lot of credit that we adapted to the changing world. And I'm just thinking that anytime anybody says, when we go back to normal, and all I'm thinking is that's never going to happen. I think we just have to now know that the world is going to keep changing, and we really do have to take our limited resources and figure out the best way of making this work.
So two people in this group are inside of other institutions, right? So Victoria, you're inside a library, so your program, and then for Laura, you're inside of a larger nonprofit. It seems like you two would have similar challenges in terms of making sure that the individuals who are allocating the dollars value the programs that you have there. So how easy or hard has that been? Laura, you mentioned a little bit.
Yeah, up until recently, the vice president of planning, Mike's retiring, Jessica, if you didn't know that, he's kind of retired already. But he was a big advocate for literacy. So I always felt like they had our back. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like we're a great thing to say we do when we're appealing to funders. But I think one of the toughest things for me with proving, what we're doing, I can give you hours, but it's so hard to get the actual gains to show the the 50-hour assessments. I mean, sometimes we don't get them for 50 hours, and during a pandemic, it's been near impossible to do reevaluations, and it's the kind of thing that falls by the wayside anyway. So it's hard, I think, having just done a bunch of follow-up reports, to kind of justify what we're doing. I know we're putting in time. I know we're important to the people we serve, but sometimes it's hard to quantify. So, where they do pounds of food when they do the food distribution. So that's really easy for them to justify. It's a lot harder for me to say, well, he ordered off the menu for the first time.
Or I gave someone an apartment or a house or.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If I may interrupt for a second, I think that one of the problems that we have is the expectations that people have. When you're talking to them and you say, well, about 50% of our students advance, they go like, only 50%? Is that all you got? And so maybe one of the things that we can do is create a plan or do something where we do educate the people that we talk to. And I don't know how successful we can be at that, but to make them aware that colleges only have a 25% rate of success anyway, community colleges. And so, and when you tell that to somebody, they look at you like you're making it up, and it's not true. So I think that the lack of information and the lack of understanding doesn't play to our advantage. Not to mention that the students that we work with are the hardest to work with, because otherwise they'd be in another program, they'd be in a full-time program.
Colleges probably aren't advertising that too much either, I would guess. Right. Victoria, tell me about it within your institution. Has it been easy to get support for your program from your library boards and your towns and your councils, or? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. We're not grant funded, so I'm very lucky about that. It's worked into the budget. We do, our mayor is extremely supportive of the program. I will say, what we work hard of, in our department there, with the ESL program, there are 2.5 people, my colleague Victoria Schnorr as well. She leads a number of classes that we do a lot of outreach. And so we make certain we go out to the community. We have gone in front of the village council. We have spoken at our board. We have gone to the school board. Things so we in the Chamber of Commerce. So we make certain, we bring statistics, of how many students, how many tutors that we have. And so I get out to promote, make certain that we're heard and we're known in that way, in the police and fire department as well, just kind of thing. And they do a presentation with us. It's, and so I think they see the value of it. And I tell you, when it was in person in the library, and that we had about 150 students last year with 50 tutors, and this was all going on in the library, I would say to my board and everybody, look around.
Mm-hmm.
Look at who is sitting here, mostly from 9 to 3, and see the impact you're having on the community that they're here. You know, it's harder in person, but we will do the same things. Okay, everybody smile. We're taking a picture now. And then I send it to the board of everybody that's on the Zoom calls or the different programs. So I just keep putting it out there, you know, with that.
I think that's key, because I think that, look, when a town or a library is thinking about their budget and deciding allocations, and especially now when a lot of the towns have lost money because of COVID and are trying to figure out how to balance their budgets, they'll remember that email they got with the Zoom of the faces of patrons who are getting services. They'll remember seeing you come to a meeting. It's an important piece of it, because they're going to be making decisions too about what to spend dollars on. And
Sure.
And so those are important, I think, important things. Let me go back to what Christian said too about the having the right expectations. So mostly everyone on the call here participates in the collection of data that we do every year and then rolling it up together. So talk to me about how helpful that's been or not helpful in terms of being able to help advocate for your programs or have data to back up what your programs are doing, or what we collectively do in New Jersey, because really that's what that piece of paper says. It says collectively in New Jersey we're doing this. Here's what's happening in other places also.
I use those stats over and over again. I just pretend it's the year that I'm working with. You know, whatever my most recent stats for, they get a year's worth of data. So
it's been a useful tool. I feel like Marilyn, in your organization, you all have used it to kind of let your constituents understand that what's happening in other places, to kind of back up what you all are doing too.
Yeah, we use the annual statistics to present to our literacy board so that they know the effect that we're having. Because we're in 10 different libraries, it's very easy to feel like you're the only program. So it's nice to be able to show the representation. So that's always helpful to back up our program every year. I would also agree with Victoria, just like even if the program is online, just getting out there and just, you know, pounding the pavement and making ourselves known everywhere we possibly can, is what we've been doing really this year, especially.
So let me throw this question out to everyone. What's the hardest part about the data, about having the data and being able to get the data? And what's the harder, I mean, I know there are multiple pieces of that. So what are the hard parts about that?
I don't have good software for collecting it personally. And sometimes I'm asked to massage it differently than you all need it, you know, and I have like spreadsheet upon spreadsheet upon spreadsheet that I sort and try to manipulate to fit the county, the specific county, or the ESL versus basic literacy, or, you know, whatever they're looking for. I've tried to come up with a rudimentary database. I haven't gotten very far because that's one of those hats I don't get to. There's too many other fires.
Amy, you look like.
Well, I think this was the first year, you know, I've been a member for just over a year, the library has, and collecting that data was not easy, you know, as you know, Laura was saying, of the different spreadsheets, or as you say, okay, let me sort it this way and that, but I can see, you know, the value of it though. I know.
I would say that for us, having to complete the Literacy New Jersey report every year forces us to get our annual statistics for Somerset County, and I use them because I think that's relevant to the funders we're talking to. And I use them all year long, and they're fantastic. And so it forces us to do that. The challenge is that I think we're way under reporting because it's so hard to get tutors to report back and right, and to keep track of them, and we have tried so many different ways of doing that, and it's better, but it's still not, you know, there are some people out there that are tutoring and doing great things, and they don't report unless we call them and they say, oh yeah, she just, you know, opened a restaurant, and you know, she got a college degree, and we've been tutoring for 500 hours, and you know, we don't get that information. I know it's happening. So I don't know what the solution is for that. And I think also, like what Laura was saying, or somebody was saying, you know, a lot of what we do is very unique in the way we help students, but it's not the way the funders really, you know, they want you to do all this very specific these specific things that maybe the students don't need or want. So like, I feel like we're really providing a service that's needed and wanted. And the people that fund us really believe in what we do. And then there's sometimes that temptation to go after other money that's not what we do, but just because we're desperate for money, you know, not desperate, but you know, we don't want to ignore any sources that are possible. So that's a challenge too.
I think there's I feel like a lot of times there's a disconnect too with the funders on what they think is possible for the amount of money that they give us. Yeah, Amy's like shaking her head, like they want us to be able to change the lives of hundreds of people, but then they give us $1,500, and they want us to report on that too. They want to make sure that we report on all this life-changing work that's happened, but here's $1,500, and it should be going in the other direction, but it feels like it's going more in the direction of wanting more and more accountability for less and less.
And they don't want to go in towards salary either. You got to show something more meaningful to spend it on.
Or rent or phones, don't forget that.
Right.
They wanted to
that's been the blessing of COVID, right? Is that all the government money is use it for your salaries, use it for your utilities, use it for your rent. Like, okay, well, we always need these things, you know?
I was on the phone yesterday for we made it to the next phase of the Impact 100 grant. And so we were on the firing line of that room full of wonderful women who are really trying to do really great things in the community. But what I mean by the firing line is they wanted to know why the salary line was so big. And I was again explaining how the people that work for us are what make all the magic things happen. They're the ones who recruit and train and match and support, and all these things that happen, someone has to do them. And that's why that Debbie's laughing. And that's why that line item is really important. Like, that's an important thing that needs to be paid for. That's been huge to me, is that disconnect between what people want, and this ties to what Christian says, the expectations about what can be done. It does not seem to equal the amount of dollars that goes with that. That's been, to me, one of the bigger challenges that I see happening out there. Debbie, does that sound right? You're muted.
I'm unmuting now. No, it's true. And that's where sort of the whole thing about granting, like there used to be places like the United Way, which supported kind of the infrastructure of organizations. And I think now the trend is with funders to be much more specific about what their funding is in projects, as opposed to any sort of administrative expense, or also getting really narrow in what they're looking for, which is to Amy's point, you sometimes find yourself putting yourself in a box like, yeah, we could, why aren't we doing? And that's not necessarily what you're there to do. So I think the funders are almost obviously calling the shots, but I think that does make it harder for us. And to your point, yeah, I think the money that came from the government this year for salaries has been life-changing for so many organizations, because where else will we be getting money to pay for all that? And I don't understand, like to your point, how are you going to run a program without paying for things like rent and salaries? And I mean, forget about even benefits, well, that would be crazy. But, you know, I think the problem is, and I don't know, but since there isn't really United Anyway more that has any real strong presence in the community, I don't know if funders are speaking to nonprofits. I mean, Elizabeth, do you have any experience? Are there any entities where they're asking, what do you need? What can we do?
Right. So that was going to be a question. That was the question I was going to throw out to you, which I don't have an answer to, but I would love all the great ideas that anyone would have, which is, so funders are making these decisions about what they're going to fund and how they're going to fund them. And I think you're right. There aren't big players at the table who are kind of talking to them about what it really takes to do these things. Because sometimes I even see companies who will spend, you know, they may have a lunch for a department inside of their company that costs them $15,000 in one day, but then they're talking to me about this $5,000 and why have I not done more for this $5,000? Like, what more can I do for their $5,000? And so I think you're right. Maybe that is what it is that there aren't these big entities. So like in New Jersey, we have the Support Center and the Center for Nonprofits. And I don't know if they're taking that role of talking with funders to really help them understand. They want us to long range plan. They want us to have quality employees. They want us to be making sure that we have all these outcomes, but it needs to be equal to how much they give us, right? And I don't know if anyone's talking to them. So how do we fix that? How do we get to talk to funders in that way where they're learning about what it takes to actually make these things happen? It's a really hard question, but I know you all have the answers.
Well, I think the other challenge is that, you know, if they took a look at, you know, what nonprofits pay, so they're questioning your salary line, but most of those funders would not accept those salaries for themselves, right? So it's kind of like you want quality people, you don't want us to pay them, we can't give them any benefits, you know, and but you also don't want to come across as you're begging. You want to come across as, you know, look what we can do. We're so proud of what we do, you know, but it's really very tricky. And then also, Elizabeth, you and I've talked about it, like not being able to rely year after year. So you're going to give me, you know, if you're going to give me $1,500 this year, but for 10 straight years, then I can rely on that. That's something. But you know, it takes more than a year to make progress a lot of times with our students, and it's really challenging.
Well, I think also the other thing that I've come into is if it sounds like you're kind of saying you're not giving me enough to do that, you sound ungrateful for the money. There's this culture of we're ungrateful for the dollars that someone's giving us, and that I don't know how to it's a tricky line for us to say, understand what we're working with here without seeming ungrateful for donations.
If I may, one of the things that I notice has happened is they actually are doing like consortia of donors, and they're working together, because it is a difficult task for just one agency to manage sometimes, and depending on the money that they give. But everything that you guys said is true. So I wonder if we need to get into the nitty of gritty on it, and going back to my comment earlier, educating them on what needs to happen. And that maybe is by reaching out to a Prudential or to some other organization that does have a department for this, and then just saying, hey guys, we need to talk to you because this is what's happening, and this is how we see it. And if you spend a few minutes talking to nonprofit, I'm sure that you're going to get quite a bit of what we are feeling. And so, and we need your help. If you really want to help us, what this needs to change, this whole thing needs to change. And maybe we will find a partner, because I don't think they're going to do it with us alone. But if we find a partner, we will find somebody that can make a few calls and put together a forum or something. And then we start from the ground up, because I think that's, you see, I've been in this business for the last 20 years, and I keep on hearing all the wonderful stories of how things were. And every year I keep on hearing how the things are. And so it's quite different. I don't know. It was another world a few years back. So, but it keeps on going, degrading. And so I think that we got to go back to the basics and really talk to people about the things that they don't see. They don't see that one of the things that happens with every single one of us is you spend all this time on recruiting a student, recruiting a tutor, putting them both together. And before they get together, that all breaks apart and you got to start all over again. So talk about salaries that you pay for nothing. Right there is a lot of time that was lost. And you might go through that process 3-4 times before you're actually successful. And that's just the way it is. There is nothing you can do about it. Mm-hmm. So maybe one of the solutions is for us to really go out there and start trying to make these connections and trying to put some sort of something together with the support of some big player there that really cares about this. Victoria Foundation, I don't know, somebody.
I love that, Christian, because you know what, just as you're talking, what occurred to me is, so when we all see panels with funders on it, right? We all go to whatever seminar it is, so we could take whatever tip they might have about what we could put in the proposal so we get it, or like how to talk to them. But there aren't forums for them to come and listen to nonprofits about what it means to be us from the other side of it. Maybe that could start to be a thing.
You've talked about this before, is that I don't think we're considered professional. How many people do you know say, when I retire, I'll get a nice job at a little nonprofit, because they think we drink, tea and have, cookies all day. And I don't think that they're interested in our opinion, because I think on some level, they think because we're working for not much money and in these possibly, in offices that they wouldn't tolerate either, I think that they don't give us that respect to say, okay, what can we do for you? I think they come at it very much like you're always asking for things, you're needy, you're begging. So I think there's a lack of kind of respect, the way they think about a nonprofit. They won't admit that. I think they admire what we do, but I think there's this sort of level of that we're not quite professionals. I don't know if anybody else feels that, but.
Well, and I think that part of that is why we're seeing that the pendulum is swinging towards only the really big nonprofits, because the resources, they don't see the small nonprofit as the things that they're asking for aren't possible as a small nonprofit. It's not even possible. And so the pendulum starts to swing then, that they're asking for these things that only really, really large nonprofits can provide, can give. Does that sound right? Does that sound?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the corporations, right, they have to report up to their shareholders and all of that kind of things. They need their name on, things. They need results, they need, not that we can't provide results, but not the results maybe that they want necessarily. But I do think there's a lot of funders out there that do understand what we do and are supportive of it. So maybe that's more the direction that the focus should be on, is some of these really large family foundations that are, or like the Wish You Well, right? And Wish You Well Foundation supports, a lot of us. There's a lot of money there. Maybe that's more the direction of having conversations with those kinds of groups.
The ones that already care about us and want to be supportive.
And that understand the nature of what we do and how it works, and, not trying to pigeonhole us into these results that they want to be able to report, but rather report what we actually do and the difference it makes.
Yeah, but Amy, if we're speaking only to the people who already get it, it's like preaching to the choir, they already know. It's reaching out to the people who don't get it. That I think would be, sort of helpful to us. The corporations who, like you say, will spend $15,000 on some sort of, event, and then begrudge you $1,200, to pay for, saving somebody's life. So I think, yeah, you're right. Wish you well. They get it, they understand. It's other people who don't. But how do you get them to the table?
Right.
Yeah, I liked Christian's idea though. I feel like there's a place for this panel of people who are talking about these conversations about what it really is to be nonprofits, and if they want us to have all of the things in place that they like to see in their own companies, like long range planning and consistent staff from year to year to year, then they need to that costs money. There's costs associated with that, right? Yeah. Wow.
I just want to say though something about the idea that some funders do understand us and get what we do and consistently fund us. They're not doing that to the level that makes our program sustainable.
Yeah.
So although they're doing it, I don't think there isn't room. I mean, if they really want to do it, like every once in a while, I just look around and say, really, like the services for these adults that we serve it's between like us, like the 25 of us and them not happening. Is that really the plan? You know what I mean? Like it's a very big job that we all do. And even the funders that fund us every year, they don't give more money every year. They don't give more money in the years where someone else gives less. They're not a sponsor to the level where we can be assured of services. You're all going to pound the pavement again next year and make sure you get it again, or maybe do more for that same money. So I don't know. I think I like this idea of flipping it, because I think part of the problem is us and our, there's like a level of humility that is so humble that it's like, okay, you want us to do twice as much for half as much money next year? Okay, we're on it because we really care about our students. So we'll do that, So there's certain grants where like every year I'm like, Elizabeth, are we big enough to say no to that one yet? Are we? I mean, we're never big enough to say no to anything yet, right? But I'm always hoping for that. And that to me is like, when we get to a place of sustainability is where we're out of that loop,
Well, and it would be great to be in the position where I think like the funders that do get us, what you're saying, Jessica, is exactly what I was trying to articulate, is that they do get us, but are we really able to have open conversations with them where they come to us and say, wow, you had a great year. Like, what can we do to help make it better? It just doesn't seem like they want to do that. And I've tried, I do different reports and I do different sit down and I call, but I don't really get the feeling that anybody wants to have that conversation, maybe a little bit, but not to the level that would be helpful.
But not even to the level, like every year, theoretically, our expenses should go up, right? Like if we watch our town budgets and our school budgets, it goes up every year because people get paid and they have to get paid more every year. Whereas some of these foundations, they've been giving us the same amount for many, many, many years, if we're lucky enough that they do that, but it hasn't changed. Nothing changes about that. We just have to fill the holes for the increase in expenses, right? Victoria, it looked like you had something.
Well, no, I don't, because our program is budgeted. I'm salaried and everything at the library. We do get funding from our friends at the library that helps support with some of the ESL that we have. And so they've taken a hit this year, with the fundraising that they have. So I don't have to do a lot of this, what y'all are speaking about, which I think I feel grateful, but do you do it as Literacy NJ, or are each one counties going after your own money as well? Both things?
So that's a great question. And before I answer that though, and I'll ask for some help too, but I think that is the programs that are located inside of libraries, so that'd be Marilyn and Victoria on this call, and then Laura is inside of a larger nonprofit organization, there is sort of a safety to that or a sustainability to that, because your budget, you're in the budget, right? Victoria, you're in the budget.
Yes.
Marilyn, you're in the budget. So like, as long as the town passes the budget, as long as the library puts forward the budget to the town and the town passes it, you're funded.
Golden. Yeah.
Yeah, you're funded for that
Yeah.
level of service that you're in the budget for. And Laura, I think you have to fight a little bit more for some of it, right?
Basically they're usually pressuring me to get funding, and when my funding doesn't match, the salaries and fringe and all that, then they dip into the unrestricted funds that they get from the fundraisers they use literacy to attract. But the pressure's always on. And just like a couple weeks ago, there was a $20,000 grant from TD Bank, and I had to come up with a financial literacy program in like 48 hours. And I was in the middle of, 3 other funding reports and my award nominations for Literacy New Jersey and all that. And it was like, I don't have the time to do that. And they ended up deciding they wanted to use it for, I don't know, homeless prevention or something anyway. So I was off the hook, but it's kind of constantly hanging over my head. And I joke, I'll have a bake sale. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Because like, I can't have a gala because we have a gala, I'm limited in what, but I've been working here for 11 years. So, and I felt the pressure for funding every year. So yes, I seem to keep my job, but I never feel like,
I don't know how y'all do, or, you're running a program, you're matching students and training tutors and getting funding, I spread very thin. I mean, I feel spread thin on mine, and I have other responsibilities at the library too. It's not strictly ESL, but it's that paddling. You look like a duck sailing over the water. We're just working so hard underneath.
Victoria, you're our best friend. Thank you for the love.
Well, I was telling my boss the other day, I'm a director, but I'm unique amongst the directors at Gateway that I'm doing frontline service delivery. And, I was asking I sometimes struggle to what's more important, teaching this client how to attach something to an email that they need right now because they need to get their funding, or, completing this report deadline, to soliciting, funders we haven't gotten funding for, attracting new funders. It's hard to know whose fire is most important. And, somebody from each department has to attend this training. I'm like, me, you, it's a lot sometimes.
Yeah. So Victoria, the others of us on the line, so Laura's inside of a larger organization, you and Marilyn are inside libraries. The rest of us are separate 501c3s. And so, we are all out there trying to fund our own budgets, essentially. This might be Jessica, would this be a good time to put the map up? I can show everybody the map. She may have disappeared for a second. When she comes back, I'll have her throw up the map.
I will say the one thing that we are always concerned about, we feel safe in the library system, but directors are changing so frequently that if new directors come in that aren't committed, like the ones that have been committed, there goes our budget. It's easy to cut it out if we don't have, a passionate director. So.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, because so Jersey City also is one of the library programs in our network, and they have gone through a whole series of directors over the years that I've been here. And it seems like they always land on top of that situation, but I noticed that they're hiring another director. And the first thing that crossed through my mind was, I hope it's someone who cares about literacy, because that's such a huge, vibrant program. And if a director came in and decided that wasn't so exciting anymore, they could very easily just cut that out of the budget, or cut a big piece of it out of the budget, or that's true. It's safer in some ways, but in other ways, it has its challenges also, right? A new government gets elected in a town that has different priorities. The library board has different priorities. You're still trying to keep a lot of people happy so that you can stay where you are, right?
And just being apolitical and just education, it's about education. It's not anything to do with politics at all.
Right.
Because that can also crush you too.
I have a question, an observation and a question. One is, when we create job description for our directors and executive directors, the idea was that, at least when I started in my role, the idea was that executive director's job would be kind of a third, a third for funding, a third for programs, and a third for administration, something like that. And I know, a third for marketing and funding, or funding sourcing is an adequate number. But I wonder if there are statistics around that, or what in terms of investment of time on the part of the directors, of what it takes to realize the funding that they need in order to maintain the organization. If there is anything like that we publish, should it be 100% of a person's job, or should it be only 20% of a person's job? And are there any statistics in there? And I know that that's probably not a hard question to answer, but the observation there is that funders don't come to us. We have to go to the funders. I wish that that they were out there and they bang on our door and say, "Here, I have a lot of money that I want to share with you," but that doesn't happen. We have to go and bang on their doors. So I wonder if there are any statistics from the affiliates or from any of the organizations here that describe how much time is required to achieve the funding that we do.
Do any of the executive directors on the call want to jump in on that one before Christian's in?
I can give it a hit. So I wish we could do more, but I will say that truthfully, at 10% of my time maybe is associated with funding and not pursuing it, but rather keeping it and doing all the reports and all the different things that need to happen with it. The rest is day-to-day administration of the business. It has to do with all the different hats that we have to wear, and it has to do with the number of things that we have to do with so limited personnel. So in my case, I'm IT, I'm accounting, I do HR, I do everything. And then on top of that, all the reportings and all the administration of the personnel. And when you have organizations like most LVs that are very small and have 2-3 people inside, it's difficult, especially when you do lose an employee, and now all of a sudden that still needs to happen. So you got to step over and take it over. So there is no time for pursuing any grants, any funding. And that's a big discussion that we had with my board regularly. And to tell you the truth, I always throw it on to them and say, "Hey guys, I need a hand here. Unless you help us, there's really very little that we can do, because I literally don't have the time for it." That's my experience. Every agency is different though.
Yeah, but I'll kind of piggyback on that. So Christian has a lot of funding that's from the government for his literacy program. So we also at Literacy New Jersey have a lot of government, a large chunk of government funding. So the government funding, although it comes in big chunks, so it looks like you got a lot of money, the piece where it's then time consuming is the outcomes are huge, right? The only way you can have those dollars is if you can produce outcomes. And so that is very costly in making sure that you hit those outcomes, right, Christian? So whereas because Christian doesn't have a ton of small foundation grants that he has to go after to get to his budget, but he's spending a huge amount of time making sure he hits those outcomes, because if he doesn't, they'll pull the money back, right? And so Amy and Debbie have a lot of different funders that are not government funders, so they're getting smaller pieces of dollars, but they have different kinds of outcomes than Christian and I have. So if you balance that out, it's still Christian spending a lot of his time to make sure that those funds happen. It's just not in, say, writing lots of grants or doing lots of reports to those specific funders, but he's spending a lot of his time trying to make sure he keeps that funding, which is very hard to keep, right, Christian? I mean, we're working a lot of our time to make sure we hit those outcomes. Otherwise we'll be out of those grants.
And talk about not being in touch with reality, because there's the federal government giving us $1,500 now per student for us to make all these changes. And the last change was in 2014. So from 2014 to July 1st of this year, the only difference is $500 more. And that shows you how not even the federal government is in touch with reality. It's just impossible. And then if you do IETs, which is integrated educational training, which is supposed to be a certification at the level of nursing, now they give you $500 more on top of that. So instead of 1,500, now you get 2,000. So if you want to talk about not being in touch with reality, our government is number one, I guess.
It sounds crazy when you lay it out like that, Christian, but that's like the best funding that we have. Like, there's no funding we want more than that funding. It's the best funding.
And I'll do whatever I need to do to keep it. And yes,
Us too.
I'm supposed
Us
to
too.
work
Because it's
25 hours
consistent.
and
Right.
More predictable.
It's predictable and consistent. Well, it's mostly predictable. So I could say to you, and so in most of our programs, we've had this funding consistently every year since the 1990s, or as long as most of us can remember or look back, right? But it can change from year to year. It can go up or down, and it can go up or down significantly. Like you can't count on it 100%, but we've had it every single year. Christian, as far back as you can remember, me as far back as I can remember. And so it allows you to at least plan a little bit ahead, because you know you're going to have something there, even if it fluctuates a little bit. So Jessica's right. We love it and we hate it all the same.
So funny, because we haven't gotten government money since they started the WIA Act, and I don't want it because of all the work you guys have to do. I understand it's a steady stream of money and it's awesome and it's big numbers, but oh my God, what you guys do for that money is so amazing. I'm just grateful that we get to not do that stuff. We get to do what we want to kind of, yes, we have a lot of different funders and a lot of fickle things, but we do not have to follow, the draconian kind of reporting that you guys have to do. It's a huge amount of work.
And I feel like because Debbie, I think your program, our program is very similar in the funding, and in particular, that I feel fortunate that our funding is very, very, very diversified. So, even if, heaven forbid we lost our biggest funder, we still have a lot of other funders, so, and what I like is that we've, I feel like we have a good relationship because we are small. We know the funders well. It's not like the money comes in and we're like, who is this? We know everybody. But I think the challenge is just that, like Christian's, well, back to Phil's question was, how much time do you spend? I think about this a lot, my background is in business, and that's very efficient, and you have different people that have different specific skills that do specific things. And so sometimes as director, when I'm messing around with the database, I'm like, I really shouldn't be doing this because I'm paid to be the director, but who is supposed to figure it out, right? I have one other person, I can dump it on her, but that's not her specialty either, So then I think, well, what kind of hiring could I do if I had the perfect world, and, how much different staff would I want, to help with all these things, and maybe lower paid people or whatever. But then you're adding expense. And then I get in this big circle as to, well, why would we add more staff? We can barely, we're making ends meet with the staff we have. So it's kind of, when I look at the big nonprofits, I get frustrated because I feel like they spend so much in overhead and salary. And that's what I love about the grassroots nonprofits and the small nonprofits, is that the money really is going to the cause, right? But then you get in this cycle of, your director, sending the thank you letters. I don't know how else to explain it. And then I always think too, is that, well, rely on volunteers, and volunteers are awesome, but they go on vacation, and then they can't come in this week. And then, then you're back to writing your own thank you letters. So, so it's just, I think it's an interesting challenge, but,
well, and volunteers are cost effective, but they're not free. right?
No.
Because
Well,
to
they're not,
have-
and volunteers are not employees,
correct.
it's, so it's, okay, have a good time. When are you going to come back?
Right. I mean, so you can't ask them to do things they don't like to do. They
No.
don't want to do
Right.
it, but it's all very interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, Phil, did it?
So I heard two answers. One, that the government funding is more predictable and therefore, but it takes a lot of reporting work. It doesn't take a lot of upfront grant management work, but it takes a lot of reporting work.
Well, don't
I
say that to
also heard,
Anthony right there, right now, who's busy
Yeah,
writing
but I also heard that the smaller diversified funding, marginally diversified funding, is also more steady. That it doesn't jeopardize your future. It comes in more of a, on a regular basis. You can make your budget more easily that way. The smaller individual funding that requires a lot more marketing investment, and that's sometimes not necessarily a skill that we'll all have, and we need to maybe there is a way for us as an aggregate to think about how we leverage marketing across each other, and that's what I really was trying to go at. Is there an efficiency that we can create by leveraging marketing material, marketing plans, marketing approaches, that by working together on the marketing aspect of it, so that we may go and knock on different doors based on our geographical boundary, but we're all using some material that's already been created, and some of that overhead has already been absorbed by the larger group. That's what I'm thinking. Is there any way to create efficiencies by doing it that way?
I think that I have one answer for that, and then I'll throw it open to anyone who wants to answer. I think that when we talk about the statistic that I had around nonprofits having to close their doors, one of the things that the same article talked about as solutions are, one of them is that idea of collaborating and working together. Like those, like what are ways that we lessen our vulnerability out there in the world and improve sustainability of our organizations, right? And that's one of the ways, is collaborating and working together, because we're not all alone out there, which is one of the reasons that Literacy New Jersey, long before there was a Literacy New Jersey, created a network, which Jessica was integral in putting all together. And most of those relationships, she's still integral in holding together, putting together this network of us that all get together, even during a pandemic, to figure out how do we do this thing, whatever it is, right? Whether it's during a pandemic serving students, whether it's how do we deal with funding challenges, or how do we deal with marketing challenges? Like, it's about collectivity and working together. Jessica, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I think everyone here knows that's always my solution to everything. We have to figure out better ways to work together. That's why Elizabeth and I created the merger that we created, because we were trying to maximize our resources. I think we feel pretty sure some of the very, very small programs that came into our organization wouldn't have survived this current phase, not just COVID, but like the phase of accountability that we were in before that. So I feel like there's a lot of potential still we haven't tapped outside the merger as far as a network, things that we could do together in terms of advocacy, talking to funders like we were talking to earlier. Marketing is very hard with all the different names, but I think that there's probably things we can try we haven't tried yet. And maybe since we've done the merger and there are fewer separate organizations, maybe it's easier to come together with each of those coming together to figure out, what we could be collaborating on more closely now. You know, maybe 24 was too many to organize around specific campaigns, but maybe now that there's more like 14 entities that are covering the state, you know, maybe we could start thinking about what the next phase of collaborations could be, because it just keeps getting harder. It's not getting easier, and we are not big enough even after the merger to like have good marketing and good advocacy and an HR department. Like we still have too many hats on the people, so we're still in need also of sharing. And I guess just one more thing, like I think a piece of sustainability, we haven't really talked about advocacy outside of fund development, but I think, you know, one of the things we were hoping to achieve with the merger was to be big enough that enough people knew who we were, and we had enough friends that people would want to protect us and the survival of our services. And I think that's a thing that as a network, we have the power to work on together. Like, okay, we serve between 5,000 and 7,000 people together every year. So there should be a lot of people who really care about that and want to champion us and wouldn't let any of us end up closing our doors. And I think that's also something we could be working on together in the future.
Well, and I think when we first started talking, because it was in a room like this that we first started talking about whether collaborations should become more formal and become mergers. I think that was one of the things that was on the top of our list, was this vulnerability that we all had as kind of tiny boats trying to stay afloat. And unless we did something to join forces, we were kind of vulnerable all out there. And I think in a lot of ways, we've seen that come to fruition. A lot of the organizations that merged in with us, like Jessica said, I don't know that they would have survived, but their service area has survived within our larger organization. So within Literacy New Jersey, we may lose some funding in an area, so a program might get small for a little bit, but it doesn't disappear. There isn't that fear anymore that they'll disappear. So there's a sustainability to that. We have gotten big enough for that to be true, that we're not just going to disappear, even if some programs get smaller or larger based on funding. So I feel like that was something that our hope, right, Jessica? That was our one of our hopes when we did the merger. And I think we've grown big enough to see that hope come to fruition.
But like you said, big as you are, you're still not huge. There's pro-literacy. I've been disappointed for years with the support we get from pro-literacy. They rarely ask us, what do you guys need? They come up with, we've come up with this new whatever. I always feel like, do they ask us, what do we need help with? Do we need help with them, you know, getting more funding for us or whatever? But people are always amazed. Well, you're part of this national organization. What do you get? Well, we pay them dues, you know, so occasionally we get some books, you know, but they might be, you know, a stronger, because there's a limit to what we can do in New Jersey. And like I said, I'm a little disappointed with their efforts, even though I know that they're doing the best they can and they're not all that huge either in the scheme of the universe. But I'm a little disappointed that they are not more of a resource for us, I think.
You know, Debbie, I really agree with you, but I have noticed that in the past few years, they've really stepped up and become more responsive. So I think it's worth talking to them. I mean, when I first came to New Jersey and was working here, I just thought they were absolutely useless. And in retrospect, I think it was very recently, and now that I am very sympathetic to people who go through mergers, I think that they were probably still trying to land on their feet after doing their big merger, because it was within a couple of years that I started knowing them. And I think now they've kind of settled down and they are doing some good advocacy work and some better resources. But I also think they're in a place where, like, you could probably tell them what you need now, and they could listen to you, or us, all of us, you know, as a unit maybe.
Because I think the challenge for them, just like the challenge for us, is they still have to first fund themselves and then be able to fund enough to be able to support everybody else, right? And so just like with all of us, they're trying to find funding that'll do that. And it's been challenging to find funding that's big enough and good enough to even have enough to share, right? Even within our network here in New Jersey. So I can imagine that they're facing some of those challenges too. Someone comes along and we'll give them money to do blank so they can do that, but they have trouble doing blank because no one's giving them anything to do that, right? That would be a guess. Amy, it looks like you wanted to say something.
No, I mean, I like what Phil said about, centralizing some things. I mean, that does make a lot of sense, but it also could be very tricky with all the different names and but that makes a lot of sense. Theoretically anyway, like how do you operationalize it?
I do think that the key is whatever we do, how do we collaborate on it, right? Whether it's messaging, whether it's advocacy, whether it's how do we share and how do we work together. I do think that's.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. I had a bunch of different thoughts. So one was, do we know how other states operate? Because I mean, just my knowledge of from what I remember when I got involved with Literacy Volunteers, it was Literacy Volunteers of America, right? And all these little chapters everywhere, and things have changed so much since then. But I had the feeling like every state was kind of like that. And then now it seems like a lot has changed in every state, right? So do you guys have a feeling, is there a model for how this is being done anywhere really well? That's one question. The other question is, we recently went through a website upgrade. So I was looking at different websites across the country, and I noticed that some organizations really have gone the route of more like just really focused on immigrants, right? And ESL and assimilation and that kind of thing. And they don't even really talk about basic literacy anymore. So, I'm wondering a little bit, do we have, I don't want to say a branding issue, but kind of, are we still kind of trying, at least I feel like we are still trying to say we do the old thing, but we're really doing something new, and I really noticed that when we were doing the website and I was doing the copy and everything I was saying, I was like, well, we don't exactly do that anymore. Really what we do has changed, so that's just kind of another question. And yeah.
It goes back to the original point that I made when I joined, was the climate of funding may be also directly correlated to the kind of mission that we are discharging right now and the impact that has based on the political climate. In other words, even corporations that are traditionally, or funders that are traditionally supporting us has, the ups and downs of the immigration question in this country goes through all of the cycles. Our cycles change too. The cycle of funding, the cycle of support that we get from our funders based on whatever the pendulum is going at one point in time. It may be affected by it, because our mission has changed to be one of serving immigrants and not necessarily serving basic literacy in the country. In other words, it's being viewed as a benefit that we are giving to folks that maybe shouldn't be in this country by some of the funders, and that I think that makes our job a lot harder in the kind of environment. I mean, that's why I've seen in the past 12 years, and I've seen kind of directly affecting what we do.
So I'm gonna toss the question about the other states over to Jessica, because she has some really good information about that. But I wanted to just take the basic literacy piece for a second, because I think that, and we're grappling with this also, especially during the pandemic, and we're grappling with it across our programs as ESL numbers become larger and basic skills numbers become a little smaller. And in our case, the basic skills numbers have kind of gotten taken over by some of our high school equivalency stuff, right? So whereas we used to serve a lot of basic skills and then had a little bit of people trying to get their diplomas, now we have this large number of people to get their diplomas and a very small number of people who are true basic literacy students. But the thing that I'm going to say is that there are still so many people out there who need that help that we originally were doing once upon a time, the original thing that probably brought most of us to this organization. And it's hard work. It's expensive because it takes more recruitment. ESL students come to us. They come through our doors begging us for services, and we have to reach out for our basic skills students. And basic skills students, in order to even improve their skills, usually have to work even harder and for a much longer period of time. And they have a lot of barriers and that really hinder their sticking in our programs. And so it's hard work, but no one else is doing it out there. We're still the only ones who will take a student who is reading at a second grade level or a third grade level. The county colleges, that's very hard for them to do. And a lot of the other nonprofits that do this work, it's very hard for them to do this work. And let's be honest, if we throw someone in a classroom when the classroom wasn't successful for them the first time, it's still not going to be successful for them. And so I think we have to work together to figure out how we make sure that this work still stays at the top of what we do, and how we just help each other to make it not as hard by figuring some of this out, whether it's more training for the volunteers who are doing it, or better recruitment and marketing strategies, or but if we let it go, there's nobody, it's gone. Nobody else wants to do that work. And it is important work, and the students don't always make progress fast. But we had one of our MLK events, and the guy was a granddad who was learning how to read before his grandkids learned to read so he could read to them. Like that, we're the only ones who will do that. We're it. And when we turn those individuals away, and don't get me wrong, we're sad when it happens in our own programs. When we turn those individuals away, they had nowhere to go. There's nowhere else. Like they're just out on their own. And so we have to help each other to do this work. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, but also I just think like, I think maybe back to the whole marketing question, I think everything we do right now is very supportive of what is being fought for, right? Like racial equality and, all those things, we support that. And we give people the tools that they need to achieve equality, right? And I try to work that into what I'm saying, right? But like everybody should be flooding to us, because if we help people improve their skills and improve, their health literacy will improve, their financial literacy will improve, they'll buy a home, they'll do all those things.
Literacy is the equalizer. Literacy
Right.
is the great equalizer, and it is the thing that has kept our world not equitable.
Right.
Our world is not equitable because people don't have a fair shake at education.
Right.
And they don't get what they need to be able to have the tools to do better in art. And it is systemic. Like it is, and the fact that we're the only ones and we get so little per student to do anything shows that there's an inequity out there. Like but we don't know how to reach out to the funders and say that, or we're not, because right now is that moment in time where we might be able to leverage some dollars.
Right. And maybe that's the big marketing campaign, right? Like it's changing this whole, whatever message that we've had all these years, which has been great, but changing it to fit the times, and maybe that's something that we could work on together with a volunteer who that's their specialty, rather than all of us trying to write something really compelling and get a nice picture to go with it. Right. I mean, there are there are volunteers that would do that, you know, like through a Catch a Fire or something like that, like help us put together a campaign that we could all use, you know, insert our own program information, but I don't know.
Right. That's a very good point. Yeah. Jessica, I was going to toss you to the ball about other states. Did you hear the first part of the question? You're muted.
Were you speaking to me? Sorry.
No, I was speaking to Jessica, but she's muted.
Okay.
I was looking at my, I wasn't looking at the screen because I was grabbing the eval link because I was going to ask Laura to do that before she left. So everyone had the kind of model in other states that we had when there was an LVA, the state level, and then the locals. And when their merger happened and Pro Literacy was formed, in the next few years, and then especially around the recession, a lot of those statewide organizations closed their doors. And, you know, we really struggled too. And the way we saved ourselves is by doing the merger. So there are a lot of states that no longer have state level organizations and just have separate, either things that were LV or things that were literacy councils. There was a state level, I think maybe New Mexico, that closed just last year. So it's still happening. So actually, I think we have a very sustainable model compared to most states. We have a good thing. And I definitely think our network is close and connected in a way that is not always the case, but there are some really good examples for us to try to be when we grow up. And I think the Florida Literacy Coalition is one of those, and Minnesota Literacy is one of those, for Literacy Minnesota. They just took the volunteers out of their name too.
And Minnesota is a really good example too of an organization that made a decision a long time ago on a long range plan of advocacy with their elected officials, right? That's the state, right, Jessica?
Yeah, Minnesota, their state matches their federal dollars by like 10 or something, whereas in New Jersey, they don't even really do the legal match on the WIOA money, or maybe just the absolute legal limit. But Minnesota has some crazy, they've really done the work, not just that organization, but I think others in Minnesota. So their state is really supporting adult literacy there.
Well, and I remember their director talking about how he knew, he was like making a decision that this was a long range plan. It was going to take 10 years or whatever he said, but like the time passed, whether he was doing that work or not. And they are so connected with the elected officials on all levels there that it wouldn't be unthinkable for them that you would just give the money that the federal government gives for adult literacy. There's all these additional dollars that support this. They've made it so clear to all these elected officials that this is imperative work and that it needs to be funded because what we do is essential for this being for our state, and it's a good model for that. Because that is a possibility of another way that we could work towards more sustainability, right? If we had
I mean, honestly, the only, you know, statewide networks like ours who are bigger and better than ours, it's really connected to advocacy and government support. Like Literacy New York is another good example. I think those three might be the ones for us to look up to.
Jessica, which ones? You said Literacy Minnesota, which I know, Literacy New York, and what was the third?
Florida Literacy Coalition.
Okay.
And are a lot of them dropping their literacy volunteers kind of name? Did you say that, or?
Minnesota just did it this recently. I think New York is still actually called Literacy Volunteers in New York. Is that true? What are they called? No, they're just called Literacy New York. Maybe they did it before us. I can't remember. They might be Literacy New York. Yeah.
I think so.
Because you think they're going over to ESL? Is that what y'all were alluding to, or?
No, I think like we took the volunteers out of our name really in the pursuit of not being considered unprofessional.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they did it too.
Mm.
And also getting that clean, like, boom, like not less words, right?
Sure.
Literacy, New Jersey, boom, just like that. Not that, not that it flies. So we have just a little bit of time left. So I'll throw it out to everyone who's left here, or if there are specific things you wanted to chat about, but I also wanted to just take a couple of seconds to just talk to those of you on the here about sort of our merger just a little bit. So once upon a time, and a lot of you were in those initial conversations when we talked a lot about sustainability, for some of us, the answer to that was this merger that brought us all, like I said, bringing the small boats together and bringing our strengths together to try to see if we could be a little bit more sustainable. And Jessica, I'm just going to ask for the slide with the map, if that works. So I thought I'd give you an update sort of where we are, so that you can see, did what we were thinking really happen? Did it not happen? So this is the Literacy New Jersey map as of today. We did 2 additional mergers in 2019, which was Monmouth County, which you can see there in the blue on the corner, and then Atlantic County and Cape May County. So what you see here is the newest Literacy New Jersey map. And all this came out of some initial conversations that happened at a meeting that was facilitated by Literacy Volunteers of New Jersey a really long time ago now, right, Jessica? Like, it was even a year, 2 years before it actually happened in 2014. So back to 2012. And the reason that Jessica and I were so passionate about the merger was this idea of how can we bring together some of the things that are having to happen in all of the other organizations? How can we bring those things together, some of the administrative junk, like some of the fundraising and some of the board development and some of the nitty gritty, like paying people and maintaining 501c3s and insurance, and bring some of all that together, and allowing our the programs which still exist where they are, to really be able to focus on providing program services. And that was our goal back in 2014. And the part that's super exciting to me is that we have been able to accomplish a couple of those things that we really thought were important around program improvement. Having said that, it's been a really hard journey to still to do those other tasks, those administrative tasks that we brought together. Fundraising isn't any easier. Board development isn't any easier. Most of those administrative things aren't any easier, but we have been able to give our local programs the ability to not have to worry about a lot of that stuff and to really focus on serving students. And I have a couple slides just to show you. Jessica, jump to the next one, and when I see it, I'll say, oh, so here it is. So these are some of the things that we're just super excited about. So when we first merged, so in the 14-15 fiscal year, we had 809 students, and in FY19, which I'm not doing FY20 because we did have a pandemic in there, but before the year we had before the pandemic, we were up to 1,730 students. But the cooler part for me, or the more exciting part for me, is this ability to increase some of the numbers around student performance. So whereas in 2014, and this little graph will show that, in 2014, FY15, 14-15, we had reassessed 199 students in that year. And in FY19, we were up to 458. And when we look about how many of those increased, we went from 50% increasing to 74% increasing. So those were some of the things that were exciting to us around being able to work on improving some of our outcomes around program stuff. The statistic that right before I looked it up, because Jessica and I were talking about goals and how many goals we had. So back in the year when we had 809 students, we had collected 508 goals. And in the FY19, we had 3,995 goals collected. So this increase in sort of those kinds of things are what is super exciting to us as Literacy New Jersey. Jessica, what's the next slide? I'm trying to remember what the last set of stats I had. Oh, it's the hours per student. So this is exciting to me too. So when we first came in, it was 26 hours per student was our average number. And now we're up to, or in FY19, we were up to 32 hours was our average hours of instruction for student. And the reason that this one's so exciting to me is because, look, the more hours that our students get, it means the more goals they achieve, right? It means the more of them are accomplishing the things they came to us to accomplish, whether that's getting a job or whether it's something simple like reading a menu. And so that's what was exciting to me. So I wanted to give the chance to kind of share some of this stuff, some of these outcomes around the merger, but also give you the opportunity to ask, because you got Jessica and I, ask us any questions you want about our merger or our one possible solution to some of the things that were not sustainable for us in trying to make us more sustainable. You can pull it down, Jessica. What questions can I answer for you?
Since I'm the data guy, when it comes to the improvements, do you think it's because of the merger itself and just the fact that you guys started working together and some processes improved, or is it because the data was managed in a different way? Like now are you counting students with more than 12 hours, with less than 12 hours, all those type of things into your average, and that's how you get in the...
I think it's both. I think it's both things. I think we're trying to, because we're streamlining the way we do things, right? There's one intake across everything. So then we could see if parts of it aren't working and then we change it. Or assessment, like where we work on making sure what are we choosing and who's trained and who isn't trained. And if it's not working, what do we need to do to fix it? So I think that there's a piece of it that's that, right? It's how we're collecting it. And it's also that we're doing things a little bit differently. So we're looking at what works and what doesn't work and then tweaking along the way. So I think it's both things. You think that's true, Jessica?
I think that it's a lot about sharing resources because it takes a lot of work to do something new. And because we have a large staff, really only one person needs to do the work of doing something new and other people can replicate it. So like what Elizabeth was saying, like if we're doing things all over the place, we can catch something that works, we can replicate it, and it can become, like we can very easily take a best practice and make it how we do things. So, I mean, we really wanted to do everything at once when we did the merger, but we know that what we really did was improve program quality and be able to prove what our program was doing. Like we pretty much put all our resources into that side of things, right? But as it's part of that cycle of getting funding and improving your program and getting funding, we kind of started on that end of it. So
well, we also do a lot of playing success in one place for other places, right? So if we have a really successful program in one place, we can, when we're looking for funding in another place, we'll say, we're going to do that there. And here's the success over here. Like we've done that a bunch with Title II to get into different programs, because we can show success in another place, saying we have the capacity to do that and do it successfully. See, we did it over here. And so then it allows us to leverage for other things, sometimes more successfully than others, but we definitely do that, right? Wouldn't you say that's true, Jessica?
We're always making the case, for sure. And sometimes it works.
Sometimes it doesn't. But it's true. We do always make the case. Yeah. It also has allowed us to take things that are very successful in one place, because then we figured out how to do it and then put it someplace else. So I think that's allowed us to do that too.
So how, let's say you picked up more of those counties that you don't have now, right? Let's say for ours, for example, let's say we joined, the network. And how then do you cover, so you pick up our grants, let's say, I'm just using us as an example, right? You'd pick up our grants. We would stop doing the fundraising events, perhaps, right? Like, how do you make up that extra fundraising?
Dollars.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be some economies of scale and all that, but how do you make up the fundraising dollars?
Right. So Monmouth was a good example of that, right? Because they had some dollars that they had brought in through fundraising as well as through their grants. And the fundraising that they had done was super local, right? It was local individuals. And so we haven't figured out a really good way to, probably because our development team is pretty small. Like, you're looking at her and then there's a grant writer, a part-time grant writer, right? So there's a piece where I think we need to grow in terms of our getting in those kinds of dollars. And so, but what we have been able to do on the back end of that is, so now we started with one federal grant, which we wouldn't have been able to leverage I wouldn't have been able to leverage that as Union County, because they want too much in terms of your capacity. That's really the tough part. And we turned that into 2 federal grants. And now this coming year, we're going to have 4 federal grants. So the federal grants we use sometimes to fill in those spots where we might not have as much funding as we had the year before, for whatever reason. Sometimes it's because a grant goes down a little bit. Sometimes it's because we didn't bring as much in on the appeal. Whatever it is, we have these other funding sources that we're using to fill in. It's kind of a short answer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Since we've been the new organization, we've only run one large fundraiser. We haven't run other than our appeals and that sort of stuff. But
and do you think, if you had the time to sit down and do long range planning, do you think that do you think you could continue to improve successes like in those charts that you just showed us if you had the whole state? Like, if the whole state was part of the network and we weren't kind of all fragmented? We're not really all fragmented. It's the middle, right? And a little bit on the bottom there.
I think that what happens for all of us is, it's like we were talking before about the branding and the messaging, right? It's very hard for funders to understand what we are in New Jersey, right? So I think that piece is then easier. We're Literacy New Jersey. We serve every place. We do this thing. We're all doing the same thing. We're all one thing, right? But don't get me wrong. I mean, we have to explain a lot to very local funders because they're so local. Like, how am I going to make sure that their money stays in BLOP? I spend time making sure they understand that their funding is allocated to this one spot. So, so I think to answer your question, it's about messaging. What do you think though? Because you're on the other side of it.
Well, I mean, I think for us, it's very easy to promote our program locally. We don't have any real success going to bigger funders because it is, we're not that large, right? So we have a lot of success in our local, environment. We have a lot, like I said before, a lot of good relationships. But, we do spend time on a lot of those administrative tasks that, would it be good if that filtered up? I don't know. But then would we lose that local feel that has really brought so many volunteers and funders and, people together. So.
Yeah. And that's the piece though. It's so hard because that was one of the things that I feel like made me nervous, right? Because when I was Union County, I knew everybody. I knew the tutors, I knew the funders, I knew this was my land. Like I knew all of that stuff. And what was going to happen when we became Literacy New Jersey. And it's the piece though that's been so delightful is that because our staff is still all local and we still have local offices, they now have those relationships that are like, hey, Sam, it's so good to see you today. And so that makes me at least so excited that that's what happens. My friends are different now. Like I don't know every tutor in Union County anymore. Like that's not my job anymore, but there are people whose job it is to do that piece. So, because that's the thing that I think we don't ever want to lose, because that's why all of our programs are so wonderful, is because they serve people on the local level, right? Like people can't cross 4 counties to get services. And so that's a piece we don't ever want to lose, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's no longer my job to know those things, but it's somebody's job to know those things.
Although now with Zoom, they can cross the counties.
Well, we've got a new world to navigate now.
We've gotten inquiries from all over the country if they find our website. I mean, I think last week someone from Colorado asked if they could join our class.
That's sort of the new world that we're looking at too, like how we can maximize, like, and a lot of because we've done tutor trainings that are for anybody now, because geography isn't an issue, right? And so we've kind of been able to get rid of those boundaries for some of the things that are helpful for us. It'll be interesting though. It's a bold new world, right? It's made board meetings a lot easier too.
I think we're gonna have a lot of opportunities to talk about collaboration and maximizing resources when we get into next year.
Yeah.
Instead of like just catching up to this thing, we're planning for it. I think we can help each other.
I think that's true.
It does create a little bit of an internal conflict because you hate to turn people away if they're not in your funding community. But on the other hand, if you're not going to turn them away, then your funding community says, why should we bother funding you if you're, it creates sort of an ethical dilemma.
It does. And you have that, I'm sure you run into that all the time, because we've run into that with some libraries. Like some libraries are really strict. Like they just want to serve the people who live in the towns that they serve. And other libraries are like, come on in, anyone who comes in, great, we'd love to have you. And it's very library to library, but it's also town to town, county to county, right?
Yeah, and it's really two philosophies that both logically you can understand why they feel that way, but they're just very different philosophies, and they both sort of have reasonable arguments to have their their arguments for why they should do it that way. So
right.
It's a little tricky.
Yeah. We have places where we have to give breakdowns of the towns that the people live in who are served there, right? And then other people are like, who did you help? Tell us who you helped. Right. What other questions can we answer for you? We've only got a couple more minutes left. It's been so nice spending the afternoon with you all.
May I ask a question? And I don't know if it'd be pulling up the state map again, and I apologize if I'm Are you in every county?
So with partnerships with all of you, the network covers every county in the
Okay,
state of New
okay.
Jersey. The
right.
network covers everything. Mhm. Us as Literacy New Jersey, we're in 12 counties is the number of
So
counties.
Literacy New Jersey's in 12 counties.
Correct, where we provide direct services in 12 counties. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All those places that were blue is where
Right.
we are. Yep. And then in Hudson County, it's just that little piece. There's like that
Mhm.
little West Hudson piece. So let me try and summarize some of the takeaways because there were some really good ideas we had. So a panel of funders who listen to us, right? I like that one. Collaboration on marketing, right? There was another really great one. Someone remind me. Advocacy together. That was a good one. There was mine about figuring out together how we're going to keep basic skills in the loop and do it better and still, right? What else did I forget? Was there any other one? Victoria, what did I forget? Those were all good ideas.
I don't know. You did cover. I love collaborate, working together. Yeah.
That's the key, right?
Mhm.
I really wanted to get that grant that Christian and Darnell and I were working on, and then we didn't get to the next phase, but that would have been great. We would have had money for the whole state, for everybody.
Yeah.
Do great stuff. Next time,
And you've put it all together. So you've got to be, you've got the information. Yeah.
next time, right? Because that's what it really boils down to, right? If we all had enough resources, we could do all of these things. We can make sure that our staff was paid fairly, that we can make sure that students that we had time to do all the things we need to do for students so that we had the outcomes. Because it's not that things aren't happening, it's just really hard to collect it and put it in one place and spit it back out, right? It's really about having enough resources. So that's the key. If we just had enough resources.
Well, you guys are doing a great job in my book.
You're sweet.
No, I agree. Always, but especially this past year has just been, terrific.
It has been great to see everybody on these calls. That first one was like really soon after the pandemic hit. We were like all home, and then we were all looking at each other's faces like, what are we gonna do? We gotta still help. Our students need us.
But I tell you, it was a recent monthly meeting, and Jessica made the comment that we all pivoted so quickly. And, and that's still bringing great programs and, relevant to them. So I think everybody was a deer in headlights for a minute, and then we just said, okay, and then everybody's done it. So
roll up our sleeves, right?
Mhm.
I think that's what we're really good at as a network, is pivoting. Like some of the larger programs, it's like when you're steering a really large ship, right? It's harder to steer it, but we're just all these little ships. So we're just like, just scoot right through. We pivot easily and fast, right?
We've been pivoting before anybody said pivot.
We invented pivoting. It has been a joy spending the afternoon with everybody. Thank you all for joining me. I wish we had drinks to share with you. I have my glass, so I'll just cheers to you guys. Cheers. Cheers to all of you.
Cheers.
Almost 5 o'clock. You can fill it up.
Yay.
And again,
I have thoroughly enjoyed
for
this.
us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
Can you guys all do that eval for us? I put the link in the chat. You could do it now or later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.